Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's September 22, 2014, and this is episode 440. We often hear people throw around the words chimping and pixel peeping with negative connotations, suggesting that doing either of these things makes you a lesser photographer. In a fun sense, I think it's fine and can often just be camaraderie, but I cry foul to the negative use of these terms, and today I'm going to explain why. Firstly, let me explain my understanding of where the word chimping comes from. I've heard that this comes from the action of looking at your camera's display after shooting and seeing something that excites you and saying ooh, ooh, like a chimpanzee. I don't know if this is true, but it sounds viable to me. The word is basically used to mean someone looking at their images on the back of the camera, often inferring that doing this makes you look like a beginner, unconfident in your ability to reach an optimal exposure, or through fear of having missed the shot. The notion of telling people not to use the wildly wonderful technology now at our fingertips, though, is mind-boggling to me. Why would you not use a tool that enables you to check your results and ensure that you're doing things right? Don't get me wrong here, it is not a good idea to look at the LCD after every frame or burst of exposures, because depending on the type of photography you're doing, that could cost you dearly. If action is unfolding before your eyes and you grab a few frames then start chimping, you'll be unaware of what's happening next. The best way to avoid the need to chimp at a critical moment is to ensure that you have your camera set up before the action starts to unfold. For example, there is a 20-minute burst of activity at the Akan Crane Center in Hokkaido, when they throw out fish for the cranes at 2 p.m. each day. In reality, the cranes only get a small number of the fish because white-tailed eagles and black kites, along with the occasional Steller sea eagle, turn up at this time every day to steal the fish, and the crane center also gets even busier at this time because all of the photographers in the area also turn up to photograph this spectacle. I'm doing this all day, of course, but especially as 2 p.m. draws near, I ensure that my exposure is set how I want it on both of the cameras that I'm shooting with. I double check that my autofocus mode is set where I need it to be. I shoot a test shot in manual mode, pointing the camera down and filling the frame with snow, and ensure that the test shot shows me that the image has been recorded with the rightmost data butt up against the right shoulder of the histogram where it needs to be. This ensures that when the eagles swoop down and have the snow in the background, it won't be overexposed. Then I calmly wait for the eagles to arrive and the action to begin. Unless I can see a noticeable change in the light falling on the scene, I don't need to look at my camera's display after every burst. I trust that all is good. If the day I'm there has patchy cloud, I might have to adjust the exposure during the frenzy, but I generally already have the two extremes of exposure mentally noted and can easily switch back and forth. I will then just quickly check the histogram again and ensure that there are no blinkies or the highlight warnings flashing when there's snow in the scene, but that takes a couple of seconds and I'm back to shooting. The point is, be ready so that when action unfolds, even if you have to make a few changes, you can do it quickly and calmly. Then, when the frenzy is over, it's okay to take a moment to look at your LCD again and breathe a sigh of relief that you've nailed the shot that you hoped you'd got. So again, of course you don't want to be chimping at the expense of getting your shots. Be prepared and remove the necessity to risk losing shots through checking your images. When the pace of shooting is less frantic, depending on the conditions, I chimp much more than when shooting fast-paced wildlife. For example, landscape photography, unless I'm trying to get a critical moment when the lighting is perfect or something like that, I generally check much more often. In fact, I generally use live view when shooting landscapes, as that not only condenses a three-dimensional scene down to two dimensions, enabling us to see the scene as the final photograph, but you also often get a live histogram, which can of course help to decide your exposure before you even release the shutter. This is another example of using the current technology to the full. And again, why would you want to restrict your photography and your art by forcing yourself not to use this technology? Really, if you choose not to chimp because some opinionated photography bigwig tells you that it's not cool, then you might as well also set your ISO to 100 or one of the other old film ISOs and leave it there for the entire shoot. Hell, you might as well just ignore progress. How about supergluing your camera's focus switch into manual mode and stop using autofocus while you're at it? Please don't misunderstand me here. If you find yourself chimping because you aren't confident in your ability to set the exposure, then there's nothing wrong with that either. If you still need help figuring out how all of this works, then use the display for exactly that. The instant feedback of digital is exactly why we're finding so many photographers just starting out that are producing incredible work, and that's fine in my opinion. The technology is rapidly moving to the background and enabling talented artists to learn how to create images that they want to without having to wait days for the film to come back from the lab before they can even see the experimentation and whether it worked or not. Okay, so if you thought that was a bit of a rant, you haven't heard anything yet. The word chimping seems to be used in a negative sense, but mostly in fun. But the other topic that I wanted to touch on today is those that get incredibly vocal and defensive about pixel peeping. Pixel peeping is when you zoom in and view your images on your computer at 100% to check the critical focus and sharpness of your image. Again, having the ability to do this is really just using the technology now available to us to the full. And anyone that tells you that that's wrong, in my humble opinion, is basically saying that you shouldn't care about the quality of your images. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the more vocal people are about this, the less they care about the quality of their images. In fact, let's take this a step further. It's quite possible that in some cases, it's not so much that they don't care, it's that they care very much but aren't actually able to shoot sharp images through either a lack of technique or there may be a very valid financial circumstance, for example, forcing them to use lower quality equipment, or it could be just plain laziness, deciding not to set up the tripod when it actually really was necessary, for example. I do of course feel for someone that can't necessarily afford a sharper lens, but you know what I have absolutely no time for? It's people that take it upon themselves to spend their valuable time trolling the forums and message boards, telling people that pixel peeping is evil, simply to bolster their own egos and make them feel better about their decisions or circumstances. I have noticed over the years, really, that the people that spend the most time telling others why they don't need this or shouldn't do that are those that would actually really like to get their hands on the item in question or know that they should do the action in question, but have chosen for one reason or another not to do so. It's like when digital camera resolution started to climb, and all of those with lower pixel count cameras were vocal at every opportunity to tell the rest of the world why it wasn't necessary. This happened both in the Canon and Nikon camps. The Nikon guys were adamant that 10 megapixels was all you could ever need, but then were all over the higher megapixel bodies as they started to come out. And look at how long it took some people to get the D800. Some stores were sold out for months trying to fulfill orders. I had Canon user friends that got very vocal about not needing to upgrade to the 5D Mark II with its 21 megapixels, as the 12 that they had in their Mark 1 was plenty, but then were blown away by the extra detail being captured when they finally broke down and switched to the Mark 2. You know, what I would really like to see people do is just be happy with what they have. Of course, 10 megapixels is enough if you don't need any more. If you don't print large or crop your images, for example, then 10 megapixels really is all you need. And if that's the case, just be happy. Surely, if you really are happy with what you currently have, you shouldn't need to waste all that energy putting the world to rights. I would love a mirrorless camera system, for example, but right now, it doesn't make financial sense for me to buy into a new system. I have a lot of money invested in Canon bodies and glass, and some of that at the moment cannot be replaced by a mirrorless system, so I can't fully switch, but running two separate systems just doesn't make sense. Does it mean that I have to take every opportunity to tell people why they shouldn't buy into a mirrorless system though? Of course not. I'd love one, so it would be stupid of me to say that. But I really believe that this is exactly what happens all the time. Maybe even at a subconscious level, some people really do dislike mirrorless or whatever else it is that they decide not to buy into. But deep down, they know that they want it or they fear it, and they have to protect their own feelings by beating it down. And this is closely related, in my opinion, to people that use chimping and pixel peeping in a truly negative sense. Okay, so before you rush over to my website and start typing out your heated response to today's episode, here's my disclaimer. I'm not saying that every image has to be tack sharp. Of course, an image can be less than technically perfect and still be an incredibly beautiful image. I also agree that sometimes when it's a toss-up between getting an image and getting a technically perfect image, the former almost always takes preference over the latter. What I am saying though is that when your aim is to create an image and you intended to have at least a certain part of it sharp, then dismissing the need to check as pixel peeping is the same as saying that you don't really care about the quality of your work. I'm not necessarily saying that that is a bad thing either. I'm sure that there are people that really just don't care, don't think that critical focus is really that important, and that's fine too. But again, if you're happy with that decision, just be happy. You don't have to spend your time trying to tell the rest of the world why they are wrong. And yes, of course, I realize that I'm using this podcast to tell you my views on this, and you could argue that I shouldn't do that as well. But you'd probably be missing my point. To summarize, I'm just saying that we live in a wonderful age. Photography and photographers have never had it so good. We have amazing technology available to us today, and I think that anyone that says we should push that aside probably has an alternative agenda, and that may well not come from the most positive place. Anyway, enough of that. By the time I release this episode, I'll be at the end of my first day in Iceland with this year's group, including some new faces and some old friends. We'll all be old friends by the end of the tour, of course, but I'm really looking forward to it. It was all that I could do to create this episode before I left though, so unless I'm able to record something on the road, there probably won't be an episode next week, so sorry about that. Thanks very much for listening today. Remember that you can find me on Google+, Twitter and Facebook, etc., and links to everything that I'm up to are on the top page at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, you take care and have a great week, whatever you're doing. Bye bye.